as in this particular talk, I'm kind of introduce a pattern I saw that I have not seen other people talk about, which is using diff to kind of simplify the development of software, particularly if you have a client server architecture, you need to send data over. So I think diff is a very good way to achieve that, because it's as detailed in my talk. So it simplifies the software architecture, because now you no longer need to know from the server side and client side have to know each other, so have to coordinate all the API calls. So now all you need to do is just send the diff. And for example, if you have a SPA, then most of your logic should be in the SPA. You don't have to, the server side doesn't have to understand, okay, what's happening on the UI and there's all that details. All they need to do is to receive a diff and apply it on its own data model and persistent it. So I feel like that's a very good way to help with the software architecture. So particularly in our case, in our company, so we recently had a rewrite of the UI, and we took this new approach, actually significantly saved a lot of effort. So we actually rewrite the whole UI in just in a month, and achieved much better results. And also now the code base is much easier to change, and our developers are much happier. So, so I feel like it's new approach seems to be interesting. So I want to introduce to this to people, and to say if, how other people think about this. Yeah, to have a discussion on it. So I'm happy to take any questions if you have any.
So I see one person has raised their hand, so I'm going to give him mic privilege for that. Okay, you can go ahead now, Dan.
So if I want, so the question is, if I wanted to save the state of a system in time as a series of edit script diffs, would there be any way to compress that information further? For instance, throwing out changes to certain keys and maps in the diff? That's a great question, actually. Actually, that was one of the issues people raised for edit script. So it's a very interesting question. I think, of course, you can compress the edit script because it's just a vector. So if you can use some serialization tools like NIPI or FRISM, whatever serialization, you can run through that and compress it that way. But that, of course, is not very intelligent. It's just textual compression. So a better way would be look at the changes in detail to say, okay, if this thing has already been deleted, then whatever changes before with that key, for example, a map. So if this key is already deleted by the later operations, then prior changes on that key, you can just throw them out. And those heuristics or rules we can come up with, but right now we have not get to those details, but definitely a lot of opportunity to do those things to compress semantically, not just treat them as just data. Yes, I feel like that's definitely a way to go if you want to further enhance this approach. That would be a very a candidate for a PhD thesis or something, computer science, I guess. Yeah. Good question.
Okay, yeah, so since Dan couldn't get his mic to work, he's written his question in the Slack channel. So he's asking, edit script is fantastic. Could it be used to keep a large collection in sync? How is the performance as vectors get large?
Yeah, so that's another very good question about the performance. So I have observed that, I also touched upon that in my talk, in the end of the talk. And so if you model your data as use a lot of vectors, for example, you contain a bunch of vectors, of nested vectors of maps inside and very deep nesting. So the performance could be an issue because what we do in edit script, basically we construct a transformation matrix and try to do find the shortest path. So as you can imagine, so if you get a huge amount of data and all vector-based or list-based. So they have to maintain the order. So you have to use this transformation matrix. That will be a little bit costly. But thankfully in Clojure, most of our data is in the form of maps. So and for maps and sets, edit script can just run them through once, and they don't have to construct this transformation matrix. So it's in terms of performance, it's linear to the data size. So in that case, the performance is quite good. So we have been using this in production for a few years now. Of course, as long as you're taking care to your data model, don't use a lot of nested maps, stick them into vectors, because most of the time the vectors, the order is just incidental. You don't, the order doesn't really actually have business value in terms of meaning. So if you really have some you want to order your data in some way, and what we did actually in our company is we basically gave each of the elements ID, and then put those elements into a vector of those IDs alone, because edit script is also very fast for the kind of the one level kind of a tree. So if you have a vector of primitives, or one vector of keys, or one vector of strings, that can be very fast, because for that we have faster algorithms. But if you have nested maps inside vectors, that's going to be a little bit slower. So yeah, so if you be careful about your data modeling, and I think its performance is quite good. Well, just as I explained, so there's no way to save in terms of vector, because you have to maintain the order, right? So in order to maintain the order, if you change anything, you have to compare everybody, pretty much everybody else, to say, okay, is this actually the change from here? You have to check every other positions. Basically, you have to try all the possible positions to construct the matrix. So and you have to search through all of the whole matrix. Of course, we're using heuristics. We use A-star algorithms. So most of the search is along the diagram of the matrix, but still, in some degraded cases, you have to search the whole thing. So that's going to take a lot of time. Yeah. So there's no way to save that, because that's just the problem. This is huge. So yeah. So that's, I think, the reason why diff was not used a lot before is because the performance, especially if you have different trees, and that's much larger space, because you have to basically roll out all the trees into a linear structure and then construct a huge transformation matrix. So that's huge. Of course, in edit script, we are doing it layer by layer, so it's save a little bit, but it's still it's an mn problem. So you have m, you have two data, one is size is m, another size is n. So you have to m times n is performance characteristics. So not much saving can do, except the heuristics we use for A-star algorithms. So maybe you'll save 1/3 of the search or 2/3 of the search, depends on your data shape.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep all of the questions in order,
that's a good
since
question.
they're kind of
yeah, that's a good question.
places.
So the vector, yes, it does use numbers as keys, but then once you change them, all the numbers change. So you actually change. Yeah, you don't have immutable keys basically in vector. For example, this you move the space, the key have to change. Unlike in maps and sets, the key once it's fixed to that element. It doesn't change as the position changes. Yeah, so it's position dependent. The key is not actually independent from the position. So that's a difficulty. Yeah. So if you only care about the values, then you really don't need to put them into vectors. That's what I did. Even if we have some structured like ordered data, for example, in our UI, we have this topic, it has order, the agenda, but we pull all those IDs out and put into a vector of its own, just as a vector of IDs. That can be very fast, because we can use faster algorithms for like simple linear structures, because that does have faster algorithms exist for this. You could primitive long listed elements. So that's what we also use in our in edit script. So if we've detected that all this vector contains just a simple data element, not the maps or listed or another layer vector, you can then use this faster algorithm. That can be very fast. So that's the way how we solve, even if we have a real true or problem that need the order, we can still solve it by just pull the IDs out of those elements and put them into a vector of its own, and then run diffs on that. That can be very fast. Yeah, so because edit script is don't know how you model your data. We don't know if the position is important or not. For since you are using a vector, I assume the position is important for you. So that's why we have to run the actual true algorithm to transform it correctly. Yeah. So just a comment. So the diff semantics with ordered collections like vectors often get in the way of diffing data, even using Clojure data diff. I find myself turning everything into maps. Yes, that's the same observation we had. Just like I said, because a lot of the orders you had with your elements actually are incidental. It's not that actually you need the order. It's just happen your data is collected this way, but that order is just incidental to your business problems. In most of the cases I found. Of course, there are cases like when you want to display a list, okay, that order is actually semantically meaningful. And like I said, in those cases, you can pull out the IDs, just put them independently into a vector of IDs, and then just to run diff on that. That can be very fast. Yeah, so we have, so that's basically you have to pay attention to what your data modeling. So do you really need order because you have to pay in terms of the cost, in terms of performance cost? Of course, sometimes it's more convenient. Okay, you have, for example, you have a hiccup, so that's naturally has order. There's no way to get around that. But in most of the business cases, I think the order is incidental because the order is actually imposed by the fields, right? For example, you have a list of people. Okay, so the people you can order them by age, order them by last name. So the order actually imposed, but not by the elements themselves, but by those fields. So when you need some order, you just pull them out into a different vector of IDs of person. So that's how I would go about modeling business problems that is friendly for diffing.
There's a couple of questions in the
in the Q&A. So let me take a look. Okay, so I will go through the first question from Arnold Boss. So you mentioned that the use case for edit script where you could achieve things similar to Google Docs, if I remember correctly. How does it relate to compare with CRDS? CRDS, I'm not quite sure I understand. Are you actually achieving the same kind of converging semantics? So let me quickly Google CRDT. So this question is asking me to compare the differential synchronization that I mentioned in the end of my talk. That is what Google Docs use to keep multiple edits synchronized. That's an algorithm that's developed in 2009. So that's using diff. So it's a very different approach. Let me quickly Google CRDT. So I'm not sure I'm aware of this.
Someone has linked it in the chat.
Okay,
it's conflict-free replicated
conflict-free replication data types. It's interesting. So I am not aware of this, so maybe I cannot comment on this. So I think it's similar in the sense that it's not achieved the synchronization through locks or some other mechanisms. So it's, I think maybe in that case, it may be similar to this conflict-free replication data types. So there are quite a few different eventually established merge. This is through merges, optimistic replication. Yeah, it's very similar. It's also in database, you use MVCC, so it's really quite similar. So basically, you write it out and then try to resolve the conflict later on. I think in that sense, it's similar. But I have not seen comparison, formal comparison between those two? Okay, so that's one question. So I guess since I don't know a lot about CR DT, so I cannot comment too much about that. So let's move on to the next questions. Wesley Madsen has a question. Says, how does using EditScript diffs as a transport shape affect authorization and the data integrity? Are certain key fields sent separately from the diffs and later merged in? Oh, that's a very good question. Actually, we found that the other concerns, I think the EditScript is very good for like domain data modeling. So if you have other concerns like authorizations, like you want to make sure that the same person, they don't have two browsers to send the same edits and so on. So you have to use other means. That's what was also what we did, was we basically for each browser, because we have SPA. So each browser we have actually a browser ID, and also even each tab has its own ID, so that we know, okay, oh, this is from this tab, this is from that browser tabs, and those IDs has to be sent separately. Otherwise, there's no way for you to, because EditScript, I mean, the diffs and the patch, the benefit is blind, so it doesn't know where it's come from and don't really care. It just blindly apply the diffs. So for other concerns like the identity of authorizations, those have to be handled differently. So just like other applications. So the answer for that is yes, you have to handle them separately from your data model. So you use the Diffing approach only for your data models, the business logic, and the other authorization concerns or like other, make sure it's then you have to use those to maintain the integrity. Otherwise, you apply your patch on some different wrong model, that'd be bad. Yes, that's how we handled it. We also discovered that when I found, okay, somebody has some very strange bugs, and turned out that they're using multiple types at the same time, and also they have multiple users using the same account. So that's why we introduced like a browser ID, like type ID. Those have to be sent separately from the edit diffs. Okay, does that answer your question? Okay, good, thank you. Alexander Furtman has a question. So can you have the client send vector list diffs with some description of the operation, like conj and concat, etc.? So basically, EditScript itself is already contains operations like conj and concatenate. So if you use EditScript, those are already handled. So yes, you can use vector and list. So what we were discussed prior was that the performance of diffing will not be the best if you use like a huge list of nested maps inside. The performance will take maybe a few milliseconds or even like to tens of seconds, milliseconds to diff it. But yes, EditScript does support vector and list diffs. And you can so that's what the EditScript is actually is basically a description of the operations. Okay, you can add keys at this position or add some element, some other position. That's exactly what the EditScript does. So yes, if you can use EditScript to send the list and vector diffs with the operations. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully that answered that question. So next question is, I have a use case where I'm migrating a legacy application and need to maintain wire compatibility. Currently, we have a middleware that diffs legacy results using Lambda Island's deep diff, then pushing this diff as an event to the dashboard. Would this EditScript? Yeah, I think EditScript would be a good fit for this use case. Because as I mentioned in the talk, EditScript itself is just data, so you can actually just look at the data for like pattern matches. If you want to find some specific kind of changes, you can just run. It's just regular data, just regular Clojure data. so it's a good fit for that use case. I'm not aware of Lambda islands deep diffs. Maybe it's is it a different Clojure diff library? I know there are quite a few other libraries for doing diff. In addition to like core.data.diff, there's a few others. So I'm not aware of Lambda islands deep diff. So I cannot comment too much about that. But the use case you describe is a good use case for edit script. Thank you. So is there a good structure to use if we don't care about order but duplicate an important? Yeah, use sets. Yeah. And also, yeah, thank you. Sorry if this was already asked, I just joined, but can I talk a little bit about how you debug your differential synchronization system? Do you have some central logging that helps you deconstruct events? That's a good question. So actually, we have not completely implemented differential synchronization yet. We're in the process of doing that. So in terms of debugging, and I think just like any Clojure debugging, you do basically do a good log. I normally use, I also actually run Clojure's debugger, like in the Cider debugger. So in terms of because you are doing distributed debugging, so I know it's very normally different task. Normally, what I do is to just write out this log. So we use Kafka for logging. And so you just inspect the logs so that to try to figure out what's going on. Yeah. Yes, we do use centralized logging. So everything in Juji is logged in Kafka. Copied from Max. Would it be possible to add ordering or timing information to edit script to get it to eventual consistency? Oh, that's a good idea. So I have never thought about that. So basically, you're trying to can extend the edit script into something like a logs, like just like a dynamic transaction log kind of thing. So that's something I have not thought about. If there's strong like companion use cases, I may consider add those extensions. But right now, I don't have a need for this because my use is just for data modeling diffing. Because we already have login facilities, I'm not using this as a persistent log. Yeah, that's a good idea. So I will say if there's some use cases people can come up with, I feel like we can explore. Yes, thank you for the question. That's a good thought. Okay, so anything else? I think we are pretty okay. We have a few minutes time, 5 minutes. So do I have more questions? Okay. Okay, so in the Q&A. Okay, I think I've gone through all the Q&A questions in the chat.
Yeah, it looks like.
Okay, cool.
By any chance, I'm curious. So a couple of people are talking about auto merge. Have you used that? Or are you familiar with that? Is that
auto merge? It means one of this. I have not heard about this auto merge. So in the past, some people did mention, can we implement three-way merges with edit script? I think you can implement the three-way merges on top of edit script. So okay, so auto merge is a JSON-like data structure. Oh, it's a CRDT. That's multiple concurrenting. Okay, yeah, definitely. I think those things could be built on top of edit script. I consider edit script really low level. Like you're basically describing what changes you have performed. On top of that, you can add like in the previous question, you can add like transactional information. You can add time information, so allow you to turn it into a log, present the log. And also you can implement like differential synchronizations and some other algorithms on top of it. So yes, definitely possible. So I think it's a circle. So because on top of edit script, you can implement all kinds of different log-free consistency algorithms, not just differential synchronization. But the differential synchronization is the most natural because that algorithm itself is described as a diffing patching. So that's the most natural way I will go about it.
Makes sense. I think you're going to have a lot of people playing around now with EditScript, maybe building things on top of it.
Yeah, that'd be great. So yeah, because so originally when I developed this mostly for our own company, we are trying to basically try to save our agent state. So it's an item. So I want to because this if it's a very stateful agent, right? So but a server could be down anytime. So but if the chat is ongoing, so you want to resume that chat. So the easiest way for me to do it is just process the state of the agent and then just resume it and then resume the chat when another server comes up. So that's the original use case. But later on, I found actually you can use this for later on we found we can use this for API to replace a lot of complicated APIs. You just use diffs. So cut down our effort significantly. That's a big, major win, I think we feel like. Of course, this diff-based approach is more like a RPC kind of API. So some people prefer like resource-oriented. But in those, depends on use cases. If you have like a single page applications, I think it's more natural to use RPC type of APIs because you want to centralize the logic into the on the client side instead of as if everything has to be transacted on the server side. The server side is the truth, so the client is just trying to send some request and get some information. So that's a different mental model. I think depends on use cases. Some of them more natural, but I feel like SPA single page application is more natural to use this RPC-based approach. But if you're already going RPC-based approach, then using diff will significantly cut down your size of your code and your size of the API.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, it looks like we're at the end of the QA.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for all the questions. Very interesting, some interesting thoughts. So I've never thought about use this to implement consistency. I use it as a log, so that's interesting. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, thank you for hosting the event, for coordinating, and can enjoy your rest of your conference.
Of course.